Hey History Kids, what's happening? It's time for another adventure, and this time it's not a motorcycle, it's not a car, it's hiking shoes. We're going hiking to a place called Spooner's Mesa, which is overlooking a place called Smugglers Gulch down here near the border. Place I've never heard of. I've been in San Diego for 30 years. And when I asked my friend Mr. Murphy and Mr. Strebler, both retired history teachers from San Diego High, what are historically interesting places we might visit, well, this is what Mr. Strebler came up with. So he should be here soon, and we'll see what we find out. All right, see you in a bit.
Yeah, there's
Friendship Park still there?
Yeah, you can't cross though.
Oh. Hey, say hi to the History Kids.
Hello, History Kids. What's up?
This is Mr. Strebler, one of my good friends, retired history teacher, like me, except I'm not retired.
Yeah, I gotta
like
go
Mr.
after Stan Murphy, the Murphy.
Like Mr. Murphy. So I'm gonna tuck you kids here in my backpack strap, and we'll see if that works out. Otherwise, I'm gonna get a bunch of shitty footage, but we'll take some pictures.
I filled up a 20-ounce thing, a metal drinking thing, and I get here and it's all empty, so I don't know if it leaked all over the truck.
Oh, shit.
But I got some spare water I had in there. It's just not good water, but whatever.
I've got a water bottle
when
back
I get
here.
up there, I'll be thirsty. I won't care that it's good water or not.
So yeah, that reminds me. So Stan's family came from Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Where'd your family come from?
St. Louis. I was born in St.
Missouri.
Louis. We moved out here when I was a baby.
And was that, what was that driven by? Because that's after the war.
Well, that was the defining, populating theme for San Diego. You had literally millions of sailors and soldiers passing through San Diego for training or whatever for the Pacific War. And a lot of them went, "Fuck, if I come out of this thing alive, I want to live in some." Well, you know, right?
Right.
Palm trees and beaches and the mountains in Mexico. And so mine was this typical deal.
So, again, that's Mr. Strebler. I think I'll probably include some of the little hike up here from the GoPro. And when I asked him about places to go in San Diego County, this is one of the places he came up with that I'd never heard of. So we just spent about half an hour hiking up here to Smuggler's Gulch. And it's really, really pretty hike. Here right by the wall, you can see there in the background. So John, why don't you tell us why, of all the places, you chose this?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Imperial Beach, which is just a couple miles over here. I moved there in '58 with my family from Coronado, and so I grew up in this area. But the thing that's so interesting about this, Smuggler's Gulch is where most historians think that Father Serra and Governor Portola crossed on their first expedition that founded the mission in San Diego in 1769. This is Smuggler's Gulch, and it goes back quite a ways, a nice easy walk. And so when they got up on these mesas, they could look and they could see, and Mr. Stus is going to pan over there, they could see all of the river valley down below. That's the Tijuana River in the valley, and they could see the port, and we can barely see the city of San Diego and the bridge from here because of its haziness. But you can imagine 250 years ago it would have been crystal clear, and they could see all this beautiful land along with campfires from the native villages. They called them Gentiles. Can you get that vulture in there?
Oh, wow. And then you were saying,
woohoo! Hey, Mr. Vulture. So anyway, this is where Western Europeans first entered on a permanent basis what is California. And July 1st, 1769, they crossed here and they walked the distance to meet up with the two ships that had arrived earlier than them. The expedition left La Paz, which was the capital of Baja California for a while. Laredo was also the capital. Anyway, there were 3 ships that left and 2 land expeditions. One of the ships had supplies and it disappeared, sunk. They don't know what happened to it. The other 2 ships landed in the bay, which had been discovered earlier by Carrillo and then explored by Vizcaíno later on. So 2 ships were already there, and then there were 2 land expeditions. And one was led by Captain Gaspar, I think it was. And that group was tasked with creating a trail using Indian guides and whatnot, and also dealing with any hostile natives. And then the second group behind them was the one with Sarah and the governor of Baja California, and all of the civilians and the supplies and whatnot. So Sarah and Portola crossed over here, somewhere over here, following the trail that had been blazed for them by the earlier group.
Or so we currently think, because you mentioned on our way here there's another little canyon close to the ocean. What was that?
Right, yeah, another half a mile over is Goat Canyon, and one source says that they crossed at Goat Canyon, so you can't be sure, but this is a bigger one. Seems more likely to me, and that's what we generally...
And I guess we in part know this because of Sarah's diary that he kept.
That's right. He wrote a pretty detailed diary every day, and I've got a link to it that I sent you, and
cool.
The kids could look at it if they wanted to, but every day from when they left, all the way up to Sarah established missions all the way north of San Francisco. I think Sonoma was the most northerly.
And then I never really thought of this, but you said on the way up here that this valley, of course, was filled with deer and bear, and so there was really an abundant amount of food that they could hunt.
Yeah, we're not sure if bear were down here. They were more in the highlands, but they could have been, because there was a lot, there were rabbits and tons of clear water and plants to eat and berries, and I mean, this would have been a heaven. And in fact, Sarah describes it in his diary as being a beautiful, flat, verdant valley. And you could just imagine it, 250 years ago with nobody here. I mean, look how green it is now, and we're at the end of summer.
I know, and a dry summer too.
Right. So they were more towards the beginning of summer, and
so is that the Tijuana River?
Yeah, that's the Tijuana River Valley.
Nice.
And it's watershed, and there's a map that I gave you of the watershed you could use. The watershed is about 3/4 in Mexico and only 1/4 in the U.S. So it starts in the U.S. and then goes mostly down into Mexico, and then passes back up.
And of course, back then it was clean and probably filled with what? Trout, salmon.
Trout. Yeah, back then there was steelhead, steelhead trout, maybe salmon. We're not sure at this point, but yeah, for sure trout. And then down below in the estuary down here, this is a baby hatchery for halibut and all kind of mullet and all kinds of other species. So the Indians had it made in the shade here. I mean, they had the deer and the bunnies and all of that stuff, and they had the plants. And then down here, the old saying for the Indians was, when the tide is low, the dinner is served. So they go down there at low tide and they get mussels and clams and lobster and abalone.
All right, now tell me.
So my aunt married this really nice guy named Benny Holman, and Benny's granddad, Benny's great-granddad was born in Germany, Berlin. That's why he had the last name Holman, and he went to South America in the late 1800s, and I guess it didn't work out there, but he picked up Spanish, and then he took a ship from South America to San Jose del Cabo at the tip of Baja. And there he met and married a local gal whose family had been there for a couple hundred years. And before too long, they took a steamship from San Jose up to Ensenada and then to San Diego, and they settled in San Diego. But meanwhile, the other side of my uncle's family was also from San Jose del Cabo, and it included...
Oh, did you want to put that in here?
Yeah. It included the descendants of Andres Cota, who was with the original expedition of Portola and Sarah in 1769, that crossed over here and established the San Diego mission. So after Andres completed his duty here, he went back down to the tip of Baja area and settled and raised a family, and generations and generations. And it's kind of funny how then, 200 years later or whatever, they end up back here again.
Yeah.
Baja. So that's that story.
So John taught here for a number of years, and he has a lot of stories. Stories about surfing from when he was a kid back in the 50s and 60s. And of course, he's a young man. He grew up here and had a lot of questions about the world, as you do as well. But he told other stories about the travelers from Europe that came here for the first time, about the things that they did and the Presidio, but also questions of the larger world coming together in that time when the Europeans first contacted the Americans. And maybe you have questions about that. Thanks, John. I think this is a great opportunity for kids to ask some historically interesting questions.